Okay, so hopefully you've all had enough time to enjoy tea, coffee, cake, water, whatever you needed. And we're now going to move into having or hearing a talk from Jnanadhara. And I don't think I really need to introduce Jnanadhara. I'd like to rejoice in him, but we don't really have enough time. But what I would say about Jnanadhara at the moment is it's from a Sangha point of view, in the 2 years, particularly since lockdown, getting to know him better and working alongside of him through at times difficulties and ups, downs, highs, lows. It's just been an absolute delight, and certainly being part of the team with Jnanadhara and the rest of the team who I'll mention later. It has certainly been Sangha or spiritual community in action. That has been my experience. So to my Kalyana Mitra, I will now hand over the podium.
Oh. Cheers. Thanks so much. So, yeah, if I talk like this, can you hear me? Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. So, yeah, it feels quite different talking like this. Talking to people who aren't just there on a screen. So I don't think I've actually talked to real people like this for a long, long time. So anyway, it's really lovely to see you all, actually. And it's lovely to see you all and to be with you all on Sangha Day. So I'm aware that this might be what I thought I'd say is this might be a little bit formal, but let's see. So we have, in the Triratna Buddhist community, we celebrate a number of festivals, and the festivals relate to important events in the life of the Buddha. So of course we have Buddha Day, which is when we celebrate the Buddha's attainment of enlightenment. So in a way we celebrate what makes the Buddha the Buddha. So that happens in the full moon in May. And then we celebrate Dharma Day. So one of the other profoundly important things that the Buddha did was not just to gain awakening, to gain enlightenment, but to communicate a path to enlightenment. So that's what we celebrate on Dharma Day, in the full moon day in July. And that, of course, is when he communicated the Dharma for the first time to his the five ascetics, so-called, in Saranath. So that's what we celebrate. We celebrate that particular occasion, which, according to tradition, happened on that particular full moon in the Indian month that corresponds to our July. And then, of course, there's Parinirvana Day, where we celebrate the passing away of the Buddha in February, and we remember people who've passed away in our own lives. And we celebrate Sangha Day, which is what we're celebrating today, which is celebrating the third of the three jewels spiritual community. And of course, that's one of the other profoundly important things that the Buddha did. He gained enlightenment. He communicated a path to enlightenment, but he also founded a spiritual community. And that's integral to the path, actually. It's integral to the way that he conceived of what it meant to follow the path. And it always feels so good to celebrate that with the Sangha, which is us. It's kind of a funny jewel, the Sangha, because it kind of it's immediate, maybe more immediate than the other ones. You actually feel the atmosphere, and it's almost as if the other jewels kind of come into being through contact with the Sangha. Anyway, I've already started to go off piece, so I better look at my notes. So the Buddha, like I was saying, that the festivals pertain to different occasions in the Buddha's life, and of course, the Buddha taught his 5 former ascetic companions. I mean, we say he taught them. I imagine it would have been just like a really vigorous deep communication of friends about what matters most. And eventually, one by one, they all attained the same state of awakening that he himself had attained. And that process continued. So after he was with his 5 ascetic companions, he went and met this fella called Yasa. And basically what happened was Yasa and a whole raft of his friends and companions became disciples of the Buddha. Not just disciples, but also fully awakened. They became arahants as well. And then there was, as the text has it, there were 61 arahants in the world. And then the Buddhas did something, he told them something really pivotal in the history of the Buddhist community. And I'll just tell you what he said. I'll just read this out. He says, Bhikkhus, I am free from all shackles, whether human or divine. You too are free from all shackles, whether human or divine. Go now and wander for the welfare and happiness of many, out of compassion for the world, for the benefit, welfare, and happiness of gods and human beings. Teach the Dhamma that is good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end, with the meaning and the letter. Explain a holy life that is utterly perfect and pure. There are beings with little dust on their eyes who will be lost through not hearing the Dhamma. Some will understand the Dhamma. I shall go to Uruvela, to Saina Nagama, to teach the Dhamma. So he basically tells them to go out and spread the Dhamma, to communicate it. And interestingly, Sangha Day was traditionally, it happens in the full moon in November, which is in India the end of the rainy season. And the tradition was that at the end of the rainy season, after people had been meditating together, being together for those months of the rains, they would go and disperse. And the tradition was that no two would go in the same direction. So there's this strong sense of people coming together and then dispersing in order to communicate the path to people who might be interested to hear it. So it's this kind of interesting dynamic of coming together and then dispersing, and coming together and then dispersing. Which interestingly relates to what Sadai Sihi was reading this morning about the Sangha existing to support the development of individuality within the Sangha, and also to help people who aren't currently in the Sangha to join the Sangha and develop their individuality. So in a way, that dynamic of coming together and dispersing kind of corresponds, I think, to those two primary aspects of the activity of a Buddhist community. All right, so what happened after that? And in a way, after that, I think that the history, I'm not an expert on Buddhist history, but it gets, I think, a little bit more unclear as to how things developed from there. Yeah, so the early history of the Sangha is quite clearly, there's quite a clear narrative, but then it gets a little bit more unclear. But what you imagine is basically individuals going to different places, encountering in those places new people, encountering, I was thinking, as well, kind of new demographics, new kind of groups of people, new categories of people, communicating the Dharma and establishing a new kind of location for the Sangha. And that, of course, is happening. I was thinking it's quite significant that that's happening here, like right at the other end of Eurasia, this massive continent that we're all living on, and we're kind of right at the edge of it. So it went all the way to Japan, we know that, like a long time ago, and now it's sort of gone all the way in the other direction, right to the westernmost point. And here we are. So I wanted to just tell a little story, which comes to us in a Pali Sutta, about what kind of happened a little bit later on in this process. And it's a story about a character called Hataka. And the story is contained in a sutta, a discourse of the Buddha called the Hataka Sutta. And so Buddha basically visits this character, Hataka, who lives in a place called Alavi, which is 30 yojanas from Savatthi. So apparently that's about 300 kilometers. And it lay between Savatthi and I think it was Rajagaha, if I remember rightly, but it kind of lay between two places where the Buddha would visit frequently. So it was kind of a stopping point. And there's this character called Hataka who lives there in Alavi. So I thought I'd just actually read you the sutta, and then I'll say a little bit about it. So this is the sutta. If you want to look it up, it's in the Anguttara Nikaya in the chapter on the eights. At one occasion, the Blessed One was staying near Alavi at the Agalava shrine. Then Hataka of Alavi, surrounded by approximately 500 other lay followers, went to the Blessed One. On arrival, having bowed down to the Blessed One, he sat to one side. As he was sitting there, the Blessed One said to him, "Large is your following, Hataka. How have you won over this large following?" "Lord," this is Hataka talking now, "I have won over this large following through the 4 grounds for the bonds of fellowship taught by the Blessed One. When I know that this person is to be won over by giving, then I win them over by giving. When I know that this person is to be won over by kind words, then I win them over by kind words. When I know that this person is to be won over by beneficial help, then I win them over by beneficial help. When I know that this person is to be won over by consistency, then I win them over by consistency. Awed by the wealth of my family, they regard me as worth listening to, which would not be the case if I were poor." It's kind of interesting. That it's almost as if he's thinking, well, I'm wealthy, I'll use that to good effect. It's an interesting little point there. It's good, Hataka. This is the Buddha talking now. It's good, Hataka. It's very good that this is the means by which you have won over a large following. All those in the past who have won over a large following have done so by means of these 4 same grounds for the bonds of fellowship. All those in the future who will win over a large following will do so by means of these same 4 grounds for the bonds of fellowship. All those at present who are winning over a large following do so by means of these 4 same grounds for the bonds of fellowship. Then, having been instructed, urged, roused, and encouraged by the Blessed One with a talk on Dhamma, Hataka of Alavi got up from his seat, bowed down to the Blessed One, circled him, keeping him to his right and left. Not long after he left, the Blessed One said to the monks, "Monks, remember Hataka of Alavi as being endowed with 8 amazing, astounding qualities." "Which 8? "Hataka of Alavi is endowed with conviction. He is virtuous. He has a sense of conscience. He has a sense of concern for the results of unskillful actions. He is learned. He is generous. He is discerning. He is modest. Remember Hataka of Alavi as being endowed with these 8 amazing, astounding qualities." It's quite lovely. The Buddha kind of gets into a bit of dialogue with Hataka. How did you do this? How did you get all these people? What happened? How did you manage that? And he tells him, he says, well, I followed your teaching. But it's an interesting way the Buddha just could have said that, couldn't he? He could have just said, well, I can see that you've been following my teaching, because he got into dialogue with him. And I imagine for the other people present, it would have had a bigger impact, that they could see, oh, okay, that's how we did that. And then he rejoices in his merits. It's lovely. The Buddha, I can imagine that. Imagine the Buddha rejoicing in your merits. That'd be quite something. So the Buddha asks him, how did you develop this fellowship? So, Lord, I have won over this large following through the 4 grounds for the bonds of fellowship taught by the Blessed One. So the Buddha basically highlights the conditions for the growth of the Sangha. So again, this is really characteristic of the Buddha. As we know, his is a conditional teaching, not an imperative teaching. The Buddha doesn't say, do this or else. He says, well, if you want this to happen, you might think about doing that. And this is what he's doing here. And it's very characteristic of the Buddhist scriptures and the Buddha's teaching, particularly in the Pali Canon, just sort of drawing out particular qualities that need to be developed. And what he's talking about here are the particular conditions that develop a community? How do you develop a Buddhist community? And he highlights these four, calls them the bonds of fellowship. We're probably more familiar with them as the means of unification, which is a translation of the Sangha vastus. They're also called the means of attraction. 4 grounds for the bonds of fellowship, we had that. 4 means of sustaining a favourable relationship. That's another interesting sort of angle on it, which highlights the fact that Sangha is built from relationships. It's in the sense of personal connections and relationships between individuals, not some kind of group. And these are known, they're better known in Triratna, not from that sutta that I mentioned, but from a talk that Sangharajshila gave on the Vimalakirti Nudesha and Mahayana Sutra. And it's called On Being All Things to All Men, and it's part of these 4 Sangha vastus are part of the skillful means of a bodhisattva. They're the 7th perfection. So what I'm going to do is talk a little bit. Surprise, surprise. Talk a little bit about these 4 and say a few things about them. And hopefully I'll be, what was it, exciting, entertaining, inspiring. I'm never sure if I should do the dance routine now or in 5 minutes. So the 4 are dana, which is giving or generosity, Priya Vadata, which is affectionate speech or kind words. That's how it was translated in the sutta. Artacharia, beneficial activity or beneficial help, as it was put in the sutta. And then samanatata. Now this is a bit interesting because this is variously translated, and the translations are actually quite different. So in the sutta, it's called, what does he say? Consistency, I think it is. Yeah, consistency. It's also sometimes translated as equality of relationship, like treating people the same in all situations. It's also sometimes described as exchanging self and other. Bhante Sangharajshila talks about it as exemplification, so I'm going to follow his lead, I suppose, and talk about it as exemplification, this 4th Sangha vastu, 4th means of unification. So it's interesting in the sutta, the Buddha talks about winning people over. I must admit, I wasn't quite, it feels a bit sneaky to me or something, putting it like that, like you're trying to win people over. In a way, it sort of suggests that you're being a bit cute, if you know what I mean, a bit kind of clever. But I think in a way we don't need to get too hung up about the translation. It basically means, well, they all mean communication. You know, they all mean actually getting into deeper communication with other people, and you know, inviting people to participate. I mean, that's, you know, I'm always struck by this with Sangha. It only makes sense if people feel free to be part of it or not. You know, so it has to be an invitation. It has to be inviting a kind of an engagement, rather than, you know, tricking somebody into doing something they don't want to do. So dana is the first one. So generosity, and it's interesting. I mean, this comes up again and again, you know, doesn't it? Generosity. It just seems to be like a really important quality in the Dharma. Really, it's one of these things that is always a good thing to reflect on. The value and the purpose and the activity of giving, and it's sort of like a kind of cardinal virtue. So it comes up, it's the 2nd precept, it's the 1st paramita, the 1st of the perfections that the Bodhisattva practices. So Dada Rinpoche, who was one of Sangharakshita's teachers, a Tibetan, well, he was half Chinese and half Tibetan actually, and his one of the things he used to say was, if you don't know what to do next in your life, do something for other people, which is a really great little maxim, I think. So like, if you're not quite sure what to do, well, maybe if you do something for somebody else, you're not going to go wrong with that. You're not going to go wrong with that. So what it means in this context, remember that we're talking in terms of bonds of fellowship, means of unification. What it means is like giving somebody something is just like a really sure way of developing a positive, establishing a positive contact with them. If you give somebody something that they really want and they really need, it's just a really sure way of developing a positive connection with them. And through that, you can communicate a positive awareness of them, even concern for them. Ideally, like giving the Dharma is like that. That you tell people what they need to hear, and it I mean, I've been. It's actually one of the things that's been lovely about the last however long it is. I mean, months tick by, but since all this malarkey started, and there is just talking to people and people appreciating it a lot, about the Dharma and meditation and all the stuff that we're familiar with. Just seeing people's response is just really delightful. So it's like you're telling them that you want them to be part of your life, you're interested in them, you're concerned for them, and a gift expresses all of that. So it's not just a form of establishing contact, but actually I think of deepening contact with somebody. It's interesting actually, in the talk, Sangha talks about the Sangha being characterized by the constant exchange of gifts. So that's what I'm going to say about dana. The next one is Priya Vadata, affectionate speech. So this, of course, is a quality of communication. It's not just what you say, but the manner in which you say it. So it's really deeply attractive if you speak to people with genuine warmth, genuine interest, genuine kindness. They really respond. I think we all do, don't we? It's really painful, actually, particularly if you become a bit more sensitive. It's quite painful to be spoken to harshly. And if you become a bit sensitive and you do that, it feels kind of yucky, doesn't it? There's a quality of it just. Again, it's like I've been trying to figure out, well, why these particular four, and what's the particular quality. Dana is like, I've talked about it as establishing contact. Priya Vadata, affectionate speech. It's like being sensitive to how that person would like to be talked to, and another kind of gift is, the way Bhante talks about it, I'll just read you what he says actually. He says, we may say that the Bodhisattva's loving speech is the expression of their delighted awareness of people's spiritual potential, delighted awareness of the fact that they can grow together. So I think it's not just kindly, it's a little bit like, it's letting somebody know through the way that you communicate to them that they can grow into more than they currently are. So again, that's really fundamental to the whole Buddhist vision, isn't it? Is that, well, like we heard earlier, there are those with but little dust in their eyes, and they will flourish if they hear the Dhamma. So it's as if if you're practicing this Sangrahavastu, you've actually got a sense of that when you're talking to somebody. You've got a sense of potentiality within that relationship, that we can all grow into more than we are. That's same with you. So that's the sort of basis on which you're communicating. And this comes out, of course, doesn't it, in the Metta Sutta, when it says the Buddha's teaching on loving kindness, where it says, maybe this is popping into my mind because of Hannah and Ali, but just as a mother watches over her child, her only child, so one should develop a loving heart to all beings. And it really strongly connotes or suggests nurture, that you want your child to grow. And that, if you're practicing the Sangrahavastu, you want people to grow, you want people to develop, you want people to liberate themselves. And that's what the whole the thrust of the Buddha's life and teaching is all about, is actually freedom. So you see the potential for that, and you communicate on that basis. And that's a delightful thing. It's interesting, Bhante talks about that as a delightful thing to communicate in that kind of way. So that's just a few words about Priya Vadata, or affectionate speech, or loving speech. And then there's Artacharia. So Arta means good. It just means good. Like, interesting, it's in the Buddha's name, Siddhartha. It's Siddhartha. Arta, you often get it in order members' names, Arta. It also means like the goal. It means meaning. But here it means good. So Artacharia means doing good. It means doing good things. I was thinking of it initially as like helping out. Where you see somebody needs a hand and you give them a hand. So it's been actually lovely this morning, just people coming along and just lending a hand, just seeing, what needs to be doing, and then just transforming this hall into a celestial pure land, and just people lending a hand with that. So now I just have to say this because words are kind of interesting, but Hataka in Sanskrit is hastaka, and hasta means hand. That's nice, isn't it? So Hataka is somebody who lends a hand. Now, what immediately popped into mind when I was thinking about this was, well, what would that look like? What could that look like? I've just mentioned people helping out this morning, but I remember as an order member, he's an English order member, and he's a friend of mine, and he lives in Australia, and he's got a bit of a reputation for being a bit stern, maybe a bit grim. He was known in the early days as Bante's stormtrooper, I think was the expression. But I remember being really touched because somebody, I can't remember if he told me or somebody told me that there was a single parent, a young mother, who wanted to come to the Buddhist centre, but it was difficult to get childcare. So he looked after her kids so she could go to the Buddhist centre. I just thought it was really, really touching, and so not what his reputation was. I thought that's beneficial activity, helping somebody so that they can do what they need to grow. Another example that came to me actually was this includes kind of giving advice according to the commentary on the sutta. And another thing that popped into my mind was there's an order member called Surita who lives at Pamaloka, and one of the things that he would do if you're in one of his study groups on a retreat at Pamaloka, and something comes up, like a poem or something comes up or a text comes up in discussion, what'll happen is at the next study group he'll give you a handout of it. He'll go and photocopy it and then give it to you. I think that's beneficial activity. So again, just providing the conditions for good things to happen, for growth to happen. So it's not just according to Bante, it doesn't just mean being beneficial in the ordinary sense. It means actually helping people to grow in the Dharma. And again, he talks about it in terms of sparking people off. So inspiration, of course, is really, really key. Like, if you're inspired, you can do just about anything, and if you're not, you can't do very much. So in a way, inspiration is like just a really basic, fundamental factor in terms of growth and growth in the Dharma. And this includes that, Artacharia, beneficial activity, means communicating that inspiration. Again, a little quote. This is actually from the Vimalakirti Nodesha itself, this text. And Vimalakirti's teaching, now I think they're the daughters of Mara, actually. I can't remember exactly, someone will probably correct me, but this is what he says anyway to these characters. He says, sisters, there is a door of the Dharma called the Inexhaustible Lamp. Practice it. What is it? Sisters, a single lamp may light hundreds of thousands of lamps without itself being diminished. Likewise, sisters, a single bodhisattva may establish many hundreds of thousands of living beings in enlightenment without his mindfulness being diminished. In fact, not only does it not diminish, it grows stronger. Likewise, the more you teach and demonstrate virtuous qualities to others, the more you grow with respect to these virtuous qualities, This is the door of the Dharma called the Inexhaustible Lamp. When you are living in the realm of Mara, inspire innumerable gods and goddesses with the spirit of enlightenment. In such a way, you will repay the kindness of the Tathagata and you will become the benefactors of all living beings. So I just love that, because it's suggestive that when you communicate like this, your inspiration burns brighter. It's not diminished by that. And I'm sure that's like, again, that's a really key factor in a Sangha. That's, just this thing of coming together with other people and just talking. There's a few lads here, actually. I can see some of you guys. We meet on a Monday night and we talk about the Dharma, and sometimes you come along and you're a bit, I don't know, tired, fed up, frustrated, and you just get into communication, and it's just something, it is like actually igniting something. I think that's what it feels like a spark has been applied to some tinder in it. It ignites. Okay, so that's beneficial activity. Samanatata, exemplification. So this means, again, Bhante says, he says, well, means, this practice what you preach, although you don't preach. Or another way is, you try and walk the talk, Now, this is a difficulty, because you're trying to communicate the Dharma, you're trying to create a vision of the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha, and you don't fully live up to it yourself. And it's if you've ever tried talking about the Dharma, I mean, having the gumption to actually teach it, you come up against this. It's awkward. It just feels awkward. I feel it now, and I have felt it trying to do this talk. It just feels awkward, because in a way, only really the Buddha can really teach the Dharma. So you're kind of having a bit of a stab at it. And in a way, you don't fully know what you're talking about. You partly know what you're talking about, but you don't fully know what you're talking about. So it's a bit of an uncomfortable situation. Now, it reminds me of a few years ago, I landed in Ireland. I didn't have a job, and I thought, what am I going to do? and I just remembered that I could play the guitar, and I'd actually studied it for 3 years. And I thought, okay, well, I have a go at teaching the guitar. And then I remember thinking, again, like, what do I know about music? I know a certain amount, but there's so much more to learn. There's so much more to know. But I remember realizing that, okay, what I can do is I can be sure, I can have confidence to teach if I know that I'm deepening my own understanding and practice of music. If I'm doing that, then I've got something to communicate. And I think in a way it's the same with the Dharma. If you're, as we say, in the time-honored phrase, if we're deepening our going for refuge to the three jewels, if we're deepening our commitment to the three jewels, if we're having a stab at it, as it were, it's a bit of an unfortunate metaphor, isn't it? But then we've got something to say, and we've all got something to say. We might not stand up in front of a room full of people or stand up in front of a Zoom meeting, but we'll have something to say. And again, this actually brought to mind a little interview that Bhante did years ago. Actually, I keep meaning to. I've tried to find it, but I can't find it. It was in an old magazine called Dharma Life, and it was actually interesting because it was somebody from a different Buddhist tradition interviewing him, not someone from Triratna. And some of the questions he asked were quite interesting because they're not the kinds of questions that people in Triratna would be liable to ask. And one of the things he asked was, well, on what basis do you teach the Dharma? What in other words, what's your authority for teaching the Dharma? And Bhante just said something like, well, I've done a certain amount of practice and a study, and that's what I communicate. Like, in other words, what else could you communicate? And probably all of us have done a certain amount of practice and study, so we've got something to say. We can exemplify what we're practicing. We don't have to be a perfect exemplar. We don't have to be the Buddha, although it'd be handy if we were. Another way of putting it is what you're communicating with Samanatata is engagement with the process, not necessarily being in a particular point in the path. And I think that people catch that. People pick up on that. So those are the four. I've said a few things about each of them. I could have said a lot more, So there's dana or generosity, Priya Vadata, affectionate speech, and Artacharia or beneficial activity. And there's also Samanatata, exemplification. Now, one of the questions, I was looking at this stuff and trying to ask the question, well, why did the Buddha talk about these particular qualities? Like, he's talking about developing a Sangha, unifying a Sangha, developing bonds of fellowship or relationship. Why these four? Why not, like, he didn't talk about Kalyana Mitrata, for example, spiritual friendship. He doesn't talk about metta. He doesn't talk about compassion. Why is that? Why these four? And so I've got a couple, this is me now. This is me just kind of trying to nut this out. And the best answer I can come up with is that what's important is expression. So it's all very well, it's really good to have metta, but people need to, if you don't express it, people aren't going to know that. They're not going to know that it's there. So dana, loving speech, beneficial activity, samanatata, communicate your goodwill so that people know that it's there. They can see it, they can feel it. And if they can't, well, how are they going to know that it's there? They're just not going to know. They might think, well, he seems like a decent bloke. But, they're not going to know. So I think that's part of it. Why it's loving speech, for example, and not metta, because in a way, loving speech presupposes metta. Otherwise, you're just going to be, well, in a way, you're going to be fake. If loving speech isn't based on metta, it's just going to be a mask. So I think there's one other thing I wanted to point out, and I think if the Sangha are there, what it communicates to people is what we really are. And what we really are is a bit difficult to put your finger on. I think with a spiritual community, it has to kind of work within certain structures, I suppose. Like, we have to rent a hall. And to rent a hall, we have to have a charity. And to have a charity, we have to report to the Charities Commission. We have to, all the stuff that we do in order to be able to conduct our activities. But it's not actually really what we are. We're not really a charity. What we really are, as we heard earlier, is a spiritual community. So we're not an organisation. We're not a political party. We're not a lobby group. We're not like a social club or a social set. We're not a society. So in a way, those will overlap with all those things. But essentially, what we are is something quite different. And I think if the Sangha are there, people will catch that. And we'll all begin to understand more and more deeply what it is that we're really trying to do. And I think that's, again, part of the practice of Sangha is trying to understand what we really are, because we make assumptions all the time. That's in a way what a deluded mind does, isn't it? We see an appearance and we think, oh, that must be this other thing that we've seen before. But the Sangha always kind of, if it's really a Sangha, I think it will always slip out of your grasp. It'll always become a little bit something that you can't quite put your finger on. So, as we heard earlier, a spiritual community has got these two primary functions. Really, its only functions, which is to help its members to grow and help other people who want to grow to grow. So I'm coming to the end now, but I just wanted to point out a couple of things and sort of general things about the Sangha. So I've talked a bit about the Sangha Havastus. I've talked a little bit about how the Sangha Havastus, I think, communicate the spirit of what a spiritual community is. And one of the things that I've been particularly keenly aware of in the last however long it's been is that a Sangha only really exists when people interact. It doesn't exist in the abstract. It exists on the basis of actual engagement, however that happens. And that can be at whatever level, whether you've just come along to a Sangha, or whether you've been part of it for decades. It has to be, you have to keep kind of reigniting it, revivifying it. Otherwise it just sort of ebbs away. So in a sense, it's kind of fragile. And again, I've been really painfully aware of this the last few months, like kind of a bit worried that the whole thing's just kind of, dissolving. I mean, I know that it isn't actually, and this is particularly reassuring to be in a room full of all of you guys. But it's a bit. But when it's so tenuous and when it's virtual, you don't have that same sense of the stability of it. So, like all things, it is dependent on conditions. We've just heard 4 of those primary conditions, and I think we're still grappling with what these, and this is an open question, what these Sangha mean now, in this weird world that we live in. What does it mean? What does it mean to be generous, beneficial, kindly in our speech, to exemplify? What does that mean? How can we express that in these different formats that we're employing? So I've said, it's fragile. It's dependent on conditions for its existence. But I think also there is solid ground. It's a bit paradoxical, this. The fact that it's fragile, that it's evanescent, in a way expresses the way all things are. It's like I was thinking the Sangha is a bit like a kind of a cloud. It kind of coalesces like a cloud, but there's nothing substantial within it that you can put your finger on as being its essence, its self-nature, or anything like that. So in a sense, it kind of expresses the way all things are. And I've just been, well, actually, I was looking at a few old photos recently. It's really great to have a look at. There's a thing called the Triratna Picture Library, which has just gone up online. There's all these old photos of Triratna. I really, really like old photos. And looking at them, you do get a sense of something kind of moving, like a cloud. It's continuing. It's maybe a more appropriate metaphor is like a flock of birds. It's kind of flying in the same direction, and people come and go, and people move in different places, but the whole thing's kind of swirling. And like I suppose I've been involved in the Dublin Buddhist Centre for 15 years or so, and it's really like that. It's like it's insubstantial. But like I say, at the same time, there's something, and this is very difficult to talk about. So all I can really do is suggest something here, but it feels like something solid within that, and you notice it when you come into contact with somebody that you maybe haven't seen for a very long time. You've both been getting on with your spiritual practice, or even you might not have been getting on with your spiritual practice actually, but there's a connection there. There's something there which feels, I want to use the word adamantine. It feels unbreakable, it feels solid, it feels pure, it feels of the nature of reality that you meet when you meet these people. And it's very, very difficult to say what that is, but I think it's also important to recognize that there is something there. There is something solid. There is something of the nature of Vajra, diamond, within this moving feast, this cloud of the Sangha. In the Vajrayana, they talk about samaya, this idea of a bond. The bond between you and reality, often through the guru or through the yidam, the meditational deity, as it were. And I think that's pointing at this kind of area. There's something which is absolutely vital. And what's important about Sangha is that when you come into communication with other people, it strengthens that bond. I think that's the thing I really wanted to emphasize. It strengthens that bond. It becomes a force within your own life that you can keep coming back to, that you can keep referring to, and move forward in the Dharma on that basis. So yeah, so that's what I wanted to say to you on this occasion. So yeah, thanks for listening, and I hope some of it was, what was it? Exciting, inspiring, entertaining.